life. Now, a little backstory, Rich and I have been going back and forth, and he knows this, is that I I am like such a fangirl of Kathy, your wife, and you too, Rich.
Fanboy of her.
Right? And I have been so excited to meet you with cross paths with you guys at the Best Ever Conference year after year. And so, Rich, welcome. Before we launch into discussing the Wise Investor, I just go ahead and take a moment and for those of you who don't know you, introduce yourself. And I know this is a longer story, but what got you into real estate?
Oh man, well, desperation, honestly. Going way back, it was 20 years ago. I was on top of my game. I had a freshly signed book deal with Simon & Schuster. I had a thriving coaching practice. I had Kathy Fettke, an amazing wife, two beautiful daughters. And then I was diagnosed with melanoma, and the doctors thought that it had spread to my liver, and they gave me 6 months to live. So I went home one day, walked in the door. Kathy was at the stove chopping up vegetables and making dinner for our daughters. And I came in just with tears in my eyes, and she's like, "What's going on?" And anyway, it was a misdiagnosis, luckily, but I had to wait over several weeks, week after week, waiting for different tests. It went from a CT scan to an ultrasound and ultimately to a PET scan. But they basically said that I had 6 months to live, and it was going to get me because it had gone to my liver. So that had Kathy, she was a stay-at-home mom at the time. She said, "I have to, find a way to make ends meet if Rich dies." And so she started just getting obsessed with interviewing people. She had a small radio show in San Francisco area, and it was on coaching and getting the most out of life. And she started to interview people on there who are financially successful. She found that most of them made their money through real estate, and she got excited about that. And she said, "This might be a way where I can make an income." And she became a mortgage broker. And then we got the diagnosis that I was okay, that the cancer had not spread to my liver, and that I was going to be okay. But it was that kind of kick in the butt for her that got her to be like, "Okay, what am I going to do here?" And that led her to real estate investing. We both started to invest. We did a cash out refi on our property there that had appreciated, and we bought 6 rental properties in the Dallas, Texas area. And that was kind of got us started with real estate investing.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's, unfortunately, people have a lot of stories like that where they get into real estate because, they have to figure out alternative streams of income, but it's not it's from a pain rather than from like a purpose, right? So, I'm sure we're going to tackle this question later on, but, there's, when we talk about this book, The Wise Investor, that you have coming out, I read it. I loved it. I devoured that book. I read it with my daughter, like on our drive, cross country drive here a couple of weeks ago. But there are so many books out there about finances and investing. Why did you write this book, The Wise Investor?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I wrote my first book that was called Extreme Success. That was 20 years ago, literally 20 years ago, 2002. And my coach kept saying, he had read that book, and my coach that I talked to every week, he's like, "So when are you going to write your next book?" He'd always asking me over the last 7, 8 years. I'm like, I wrote my book, I'm done. But it was something about the stories that I was hearing from Real Wealth members and how they became financially free, the process and the journey that they've gone through. One day I said to my coach, if I was going to write a book, I'd probably want to write a parable, want to write a story, because just a story, it just communicates information in a different way, in an emotional way, and it elicits this change in us where just the way we're wired as human beings, stories hit home more, they sink in more. So that was my big thing around, like, I don't want to just write another self-help book. I don't want to write another nonfiction book. I'm not an expert in real estate investing. I know it well and I do it. I'm a licensed broker, but I don't feel I'm qualified to write a book on real estate investing, but I am qualified to write a story about the shifts and what people go through and how they learn and the basic principles of financial freedom. So that was it for me. I was just like, then once that idea came into my head about like, I'm going to write a parable. And I love parables, from The Alchemist to Monk Who Sold His Ferrari to Go Giver to, all these different books that have had an influence on me and a powerful influence on me. I was like, I can create the same type of thing for, with a focus on investing and financial freedom and what real wealth really is.
Oh, well, that leads me to my next question. Okay, so one of the things you talk about in the book is real wealth. What exactly do you mean by that?
That's why we called our company Real Wealth. It was 2003 when we formed the Real Wealth Network. And Real Wealth to us, it's about not just about making a lot of money. Like, that's great, and it's definitely one of the purposes is making money and good financial income. But it's about more than that. It's about having the money, but also the freedom to live life on your terms, on your own terms. So it's being able to do what you want, with the people you want to be with when you want to do it, not being burdened. And so it's freedom. That's real wealth to us is freedom. It's when it's working in all different areas of your life. In the book, I talk about that life wheel that Ryan, the protagonist, fills out, and the mentor guides him through. And he looks at those major areas of his life, from family to health to personal growth and development to spirituality to his romance and all that stuff. So that's real wealth to me, is when all those areas of your life are working. That's real wealth to me.
I love that. I love that. And that's an exercise that I do with my husband at least once a year, but on a weekly basis. It's in my planner. You fill out the little wheel. How are you doing these different 78 areas of life? And is your wheel spinning very smoothly, or is it like really kind of clunky, which I tend to stay clunky on a side or two myself?
Yeah, it's always a little clunky, right? But that's what, then you work on it. You're like, okay, so this area is like, I'm only like at a 7 on this satisfaction area of this in my life. So how do I bump that up to an 8 or a 9? What needs to happen? What needs to change? Where do I need to grow? So it's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. So one thing, that caught my eye, like whenever, in this definition of real wealth, there's a heavy focus on finances. And in the book, you offered up a revised definition of debt, something beyond the Robert Kiyosaki, like, liability is, income, asset minus the expenses of the asset. And, if it's positive, it's an asset. If it's negative, it's a liability.
Yeah.
The definition you put in here are liabilities are everything from financial debt on depreciating assets to bad habits. The only good debt is a debt that brings a higher return than it costs. Okay, we're with you on that. If something provides income, better health, happiness, or time, it's an asset. If something costs you money, health, happiness, or time, it's a liability. It's pretty simple. So I love that. I love that. On the surface, this definition just seems to buck any traditional definition that we have out there of debt, and that what many investors adhere to. So where did you come up with this, and why should people listening here today really kind of embody this new definition?
Well, that was just one of those aha moments on a long hike. I was hiking, I was alone, and that's when I get my best insights, honestly, being outdoors, in nature, moving my body. And I was just, I was pondering the message of this book and the story, and what is it that I've seen people at Real Wealth, the investors at Real Wealth, what have I seen them do and how have they changed? So that's what it really came back to, is like, yeah, definitely. Debt is okay if you get a higher return than the debt is costing you, right? We know that. But there's something about, I had just gone through a real challenging, like a breakup with a really good friend of mine. And it amazed me to be like, I've never lost a friendship in my whole life. And this was the first time I've lost a friend and really tried to work it out. And I realized that he was actually a little bit toxic. When I started to look at that. And so I think that's where it hit home for me. It's like, wow, he's actually was a liability in my life. And so that's where the aha moment is. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah. So if something costs you your health, it's a liability. If something costs you something in your relationship, then it can be a liability. If something's costing you time, then it's a liability. So it's just a way to flip it around for me to just compartmentalize things of like, I want to put more assets. I want to gain assets in my life. So good people, things that are going to save me time, whatever it might be, something that's going to bring me more happiness. So that's sort of it all came down to me. For me, it's just compartmentalizing. Easy, put it in. This is the column. This is the asset column. This is the liability column. What is this decision going to bring me?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have that monogrammed on stenciled on a canvas and put on my wall for sure. I love that.
I love that.
So Ryan, the protagonist. Well, first of all, are the characters based on real people? When people write stories like this, I'm like, where obviously there's an inspiration, but are they based on real people?
Yes, yeah, absolutely not. They're kind of a combination, a blending and a morphing of people that I've encountered in my life. John, who is the wise mentor, he is my future self. So he's who I hope to be someday when I'm his age. His wisdom, his groundedness, his experience as an investor and a businessman, all that stuff. So I based a lot of that on, and it was a really cool experience writing the story, thinking, okay, almost like, what would my future self do? What would my future self say here? How would he advise it? So it was kind of easy to step into that role. And then Ryan is kind of a combination, the protagonist, he's kind of a combination of, honestly, my two brothers, who work W-2 jobs and don't have the freedom that I wish they had. It's a combination of the people in Real Wealth that I've heard their stories and where they came from and how they finally get the courage to start their own thing or become financially free, all that. So it's a blend, yes. So there's definitely some real people in there. And then, some of the stuff that Ryan went through with his wife in the story, I went through with Kathy and Kathy went through with me. So it's all those lessons learned about, I just really wanted to, number one, fall in love with my characters. And I did. I really just love Ryan Brooks. I love Carissa, his wife. I just fell in love. And then the bad guy in the book, I really is just like, whoa, that came from the bullies in my life and the bosses I had that were so just mean spirited and all that. So yeah, they definitely come from real people.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about Ryan and Carissa. Okay, they're budding and they're normal people, right? And they're budding investors. So you take them through a journey to live their best life, and talk to me how that journey kind of lays out, and especially whenever you're working with people, in your day-to-day job, is this pretty common trajectory that these characters have?
Yeah, I think it's very common. I think it's the most common story that we see. And it's funny, I had about almost 30 beta readers, everything from our investment counselors to other people in the real estate investing space. My friend Brandon Turner read it, Tarl Yarber read it, Ken McElroy. So people all the way, the whole range from people who have never invested and all the way up to people who are very successful investors. So I wanted that feedback. And the common thing that I heard from everyone was, wow, this guy and this couple are going through so many of the same things that I went through, or so many things. And I had one of the readers say, he's me, Ryan is me. I've gone through the same process. And he's someone who came in, who actually bought a couple investment properties with his wife, and they had got debt free and all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's the way it works out. It's a common thing, a common challenge that they go through. And I think the biggest, most important thing is how they grew through it. How, especially Ryan, the protagonist, how he grew, how he became a better version of himself, how he learned to get that awareness and that journey over time of where he goes from, in that initial kind of almost checked out, not very fully present, just to, getting to where he is. He becomes very wealthy.
Right. Let's start there. Right. So the main character, Ryan, he's, albeit very reluctantly, he starts participating in a visioning process when he first encounters, his mentor.
Yeah.
Is this your personal vision process? And can you clue the readers in on this? And how has it impacted your investing journey?
Yeah, it's big. It's, it's, I call it future self, future focus. It's being able to visualize where you want to go. It's so powerful. It's like what we focus on becomes our reality, right? So it's like, what is your focus? Where is our focus? And yeah, I've been, before Real Wealth, I was a certified coach. I got certified, but way back in 1996, when the coaching industry, no one even knew what it was. I say I'm a coach, and they say, oh, what sport, right? But then just to see how the coaching industry has evolved over the years is incredible. And working with so many clients over those years and hearing the story and guiding them through this visualization process, you get to actually step forward into the future. You can go 5, 10, 20 years, and you actually get to meet you in the future. You get to meet your future self. And the powerful, and obviously it's this process that the mentor takes Ryan through. And it's something that it happened for me. It happened way back when I was in college. I was in school using one of those little micro cassette recorders to record the lecture. And then I got home and I would listen to it and take notes and everything. And I don't know where my brain went, but all of a sudden I started thinking about my future, and I flipped that little cassette over, that micro cassette, put it on the other side, it was blank. And I just said, a day in the life of Rich Fettke. And I just went in and just told this whole story of just visualizing. I was seeing it as I described it. And I used to listen to that tape all the time. And that tape that I made back then of my future is me now. It's really, really powerful. So when I look at who my future self was, who I saw myself in 20, 30 years, and to see that I've become very much close to that future self, it's just, yeah, it's a game changer. And it's for me and so many of my clients.
Oh man, amazing. Brings to mind the quote like from Tony Robbins, like where your focus goes, energy flows, right?
Yeah, so true.
You got to create the focus first, right? So there's a part of the book where you talk about incremental changes. And here's another quote. It's the journey. This is where you find happiness. And I love that. I underlined it, I scored it. I like repeated it 5 times to my daughter because she was reading the book with me. But I know I have a personal, understanding in this, but what do you mean by this? And how would this help shift somebody's journey by kind of like framing happiness in this way?
Yeah, and that's not new, right? The journey is more important than the destination and all that. What that really came down to is those incremental steps. There's a book called Happiness, written by Tal Ben-Shahar. And Tal Ben-Shahar was a university professor at Harvard who still to this day has the record for the most attended class in all of Harvard's history. And it was a course on happiness. That's pretty cool. So he and his students at Harvard studied happiness. What truly brings happiness to human beings? So what really makes us happy? And it's not about the shiny object. It's not about the big house. It's not about the nice car. It's not about the bank account. None of that. It's about progressively moving toward what matters most to us. That's what makes us happy. Where, as the Greeks said, we're teleological beings, telos meaning a target. When we're moving toward a target, that's when we're really happy. So in that, when Tal Ben-Shahar has this awesome quote in the book, Happier, he says, it's not about the peak of the mountain, getting to the peak of the mountain, but it's also not about wandering aimlessly around the base of the mountain. Happiness is when you're enjoying the process of hiking toward the peak. So I love that. It's like, you do have a destination that you're moving toward. That's my goal. That's where I want to go. That's what a great life looks like for me. And that's me at my best. And when you know that you're every day taking little steps and moving up the mountain, but you're enjoying that process and being like, yeah, I'm getting better. I'm better than I was yesterday. And everything's improving. When we get better, everything around us gets better. So that's what it all came down to, right?
Oh, amazing. So I mean, there's an antithesis, right? Like, if we find happiness in the journey, I mean, it can't always be that smooth, right? That's life, right? There's obstacles that get thrown in the way. In the book, you called them gremlins. And like I said at the beginning of the show, like we had some tech gremlins going on.
Right, for sure.
So what do you mean in the book what do you mean by gremlins? And what are some common gremlins that investors face along their journey?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start with that. I heard about the gremlin from coaching when I went through coach training and coach certification. It was about a 1.5-year process. And one of the required readings was a book called Taming Your Gremlin. Just amazing little thin book, but really powerful, written by psychologists. And it's the gremlin it's that little voice, or sometimes it's a big voice inside your head, right? And we all have it. I've coached everyone from CEOs to homemakers and from artists to attorneys, right? The whole range of people I've coached over, hundreds of people. Every single person, including me for sure, has this gremlin. It's this little voice in our head that says, you can't do that. You're going to fail. There's going to be loss. You're going to be embarrassed. All that. It's that little, it just whispers in our mind, and it can run the show because it lives in our subconscious mind. And basically we were born with our gremlins. Our gremlins were born with us, and it's really not the enemy. So a lot of people see it as this like like this evil bad thing, but really it's doing its best job to protect you from harm and failure, embarrassment and loss, everything. So, but it often overprotects. It tries to do too much, and or it bases future decisions on the past. It's like, well, that person invested in real estate in 2008 and look what happened to them. That gremlin takes that and says, you're going to lose today, you know? And you're like, well, no, wait a minute. No, you know, it's a different time. It's a different market. It's all these things. So when it comes to the gremlin, I think the most important thing is just realizing that we all have a gremlin. Second is noticing it. So what happens to you when that gremlin is screaming at you or whispering at you, saying don't, or you're going to fail, or you're going to all that stuff, pointing out the obstacles? What do you do with it? And so I think the best thing to do is just, number one is take a deep breath, you know, like at the conference, when we were just at that last conference, I took the whole audience through several deep breaths because it has a magical effect on our body and our brains. It calms down our prefrontal cortex, our heart rate slows down, we get more grounded. So that'd be number one. And then number two, you just say, okay, gremlin, what's going on? What are you trying to protect me from? I want to listen to you. I want to hear this. And that little voice, if you close your eyes for a moment and take a few deep breaths, that little voice will say, this is what I'm afraid of, but this is what I'm concerned about. And then you can say, okay, what do you need? What do you need from me, gremlin? And it will quiet down. It will say, here's what I need from you. So we're tapping into our subconscious mind that's way more powerful than our conscious mind. And that gives us answers. Just like meeting your future self, you get answers that you were like, oh, I never thought of that. Same thing when you communicate with the gremlin.
That's amazing. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and they do a lot of social emotional training in schools these days. I mean, I don't remember having that as a child for sure. And I think for her in her schooling, they call it the wise owl, that prefrontal cortex, and the gremlin in the back, more the guard dog, right?
Right. Yeah. It's down in the brainstem, right?
talk to the guard dog, and get them to kind of calm down, have a conversation.
Yeah.
So if the gremlin is there to kind of help serve us, I guess part of my question is here, because we see Ryan go through this journey almost subconsciously, but how did he start really trying to tame that gremlin? I mean, there were some tactical things that he did, but what was kind of going on in the background there for him to be able to move, tame that gremlin and then become a successful investor?
I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier about the small steps. It's like he was in this mindset of this is where I am, I'm stuck here, and he was only seeing that one solution to his problem. It was just money, right? So he's so focused on that, and then getting that advice from his wise mentor about just small steps, small changes, reducing your spending, understanding where your money's going, even some of the choices he made for his health, some of the choices he's made for his relationship and being more present. Excuse me. But so he made these small little steps. And what happens is each time you have a small step like that, when you have that little win, it sends this message to yourself. And it's like his self-esteem started to grow, because self-esteem is really like, it's esteem that we earn for ourselves, right? So whenever you follow through and you do something, even if it's small, it builds your motivation, it builds your willpower, it builds your self-belief, it builds your self-esteem. So I think that was the process for Ryan in the book, is like, he just started to make these small incremental changes in different areas of his life, financially, in his relationship, the way he was with his kids, the way with his health, and all over time, and the story takes place over time, that 5-year span, you really get to see that what small changes add up to be.
Yeah. So, so Ryan started off in that traditional American narrative, like get a good job, get a good education, get a good job, buy a house, get the car, American consumption, save in your retirement accounts, maybe invest in the market. But in the book, John, and I know you've done this as well, but in the book, John starts, discussing assets. Majority of us here and our listeners are very interested in real estate. We understand that, but why is it important to build these type of assets, and how can people get over that fear, like that gremlin from 2008 and 2010 that that we're somehow regressing. There's going to be a bubble. Inflation's running rampant right now. The markets are at all-time high. Like, why now is still the time to build assets, and why is real estate still the right asset to consider?
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to that answer, really. I mean, the first part is around the assets, right? John inspires him and educates him on different assets he could invest in, and that he's not going to get ahead just from his W-2 job. He kind of lays out the numbers and has Ryan take a good hard look at the amount of income. Even if he makes more money, even if he gets a promotion, even if he gets bonuses, there's no way he's going to be able to get ahead living the lifestyle that he's been living. So that's where John goes into, explaining the power of real estate and why he loves real estate investing and rental properties. And John invests in a lot of things you learn later in the book. Real estate wise, he starts with single family properties, but he goes far beyond that, and to the commercial and everything. But he also teaches him about having his own business and supporting his wife and her business, and how a business also can create a cash flow machine and an asset. So that's another big one too. But the fear one, that is the biggest thing that holds people back. When Kathy and I interview people on the Real Wealth Show, and we're finding out what their story is, usually it's the fear of I don't have enough, I can't get started. What about 2008, right? That comes up all the time. But I mean, it's about getting the facts. So if the Gremlins say, what about 2008? And look how much people lost and everything, it's going to happen again. Then you have to say, okay, Gremlin, okay, what do you need? You want me to learn something? And so that narrative that we grow up with, like what we're taught in school, and how it's so focused on just investing in the Wall Street casino, right? And put the focus in stocks. And it's just, we're so programmed for that. I think it comes down to education, like attendees of this webinar, right? Just people who we are committed to learning, we're committed to growing, to seeing a different way, because we know that we weren't taught it in school. So it's all about just improving your financial intelligence, improving your financial education. And when you look back at something like 2008, you realize that it was a different world. That was a credit bubble. That's what, people could get loans. Kathy was a mortgage broker at that time. And people would walk in and no income, no credit check, anything like that. They wouldn't check anything. You could just fill something out. And so a lot of people just got into properties with higher interest rates, with no money down. And so today we're not going to see that same explosion or recession that's going to happen from the credit bubble. It's different. People don't want to give up their houses now. Whereas before, they'd walk away, they'd have no equity in it. Their payment was so much. And even today, people aren't going to walk away from their house either, because when you look at the interest rates that they're in now, and the equity they already have in their house, it's appreciated over these last, 10 years, 5 years, even the last 3 years, right? People don't want to walk away from that like 2008. It's a whole different world. And if they did walk away from it, then they're going to have to go and rent, right? Because they're going to be out of their house, and rents have skyrocketed. So, I mean, it's just a different world. So that's how I would answer my gremlin to that one. It's like, wait a minute, gremlin, it's a different world now. It's different,
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I bought my first house in 2006 at 103% financing. Who does that these days?
No one does that nowadays.
I borrowed the down payment from my grandfather. I had zero money in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different world.
I'm so thankful that, my family was able to support me to get in that first property. But yeah, from a lending perspective, I was not the person that he should have been lending to, for sure.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So, a lot of the book is around, kind of this, parable, this journey that Ryan goes through. But a lot of it is about just the mindset. So when you look at kind of like the coaching mindset, all the information that's out there, people talking about investor mindset, what is a passionately held belief about mindset that you actually disagree with?
Oh, let's see, a passionately held belief about mindset. That mindset is everything. I definitely don't think it's everything. I think it's important. I think you have to have your mindset right. And it's like defining mindset, because it is kind of a buzzword right now, and it's like, when I was going over this stuff with clients, 15, 20 years ago, we weren't saying so much mindset. It was just about, it was about perspective, right? And the way you see things and focus, what's your focus on, like I said earlier. So there's something about, like, it's more than just mindset. You have to have, number one, the belief, right? And how do you get that belief? Believing in what's possible, where you can be, who you can become. That, I think a lot of it was like the future self and getting clear on that, laying out your game plan. And it's so many of us don't stop to really think about, what do I really want? What does it look like? What does my future look like? How much monthly cash flow do I want? Instead of just looking at, I want my net worth to be this. It's like, wait a minute, that's okay, but how much cash flow do I want every month coming in? So it's like changing that mindset that way. But once you get clarity on that, then there's action. So that this held belief of, like, if I just believe it, if I just think abundantly and I just focus on what I want, that it's going to happen. That's what I don't fully agree with. It's that getting clear on what it is, but then laying out the small steps. What can you do on a daily basis? How can you improve yourself? How can you learn more? And committing to small actions. There's a quote that the mentor writes in his little notebook. It says, it's from Rick Hansen. It was, if you take care of the minutes, the years will take care of themselves. So it's about taking care of the minutes. And I think that is even more powerful than the mindset, because you can have a mindset all day long, but if you're not taking the action and consistently getting better and improving and getting uncomfortable, and that would be the next part, is getting uncomfortable. That's, as investors, investing means risk, right? Is part of it. So it's getting uncomfortable, whether that means investing, whether that means having that heart-to-heart conversation with your partner, being really honest and open. It might mean being uncomfortable, might mean getting up earlier and getting exercise in. So I think that's a big part of it too, taking action.
Awesome. So Ryan, the protagonist, he was so lucky to find John, his mentor. Mm-hmm. How would you suggest someone listening here find their own mentor?
Oh, that's a great question, because I went through that, and I've had some amazing mentors in my life. It comes back to, in the beginning, remember, Ryan's trying to find a mentor. His boss gives him that assignment, and he's having a hard time because the people that he thought he looked up to, when he kind of saw behind the scenes, he's like, oh, wait a minute, do I really want to schmooze people to try to be my mentor? And I want someone who's going to have an impact on my whole life. So yes, you can find a mentor who's like a mentor, just, like your investing mentor, someone who's got experience. And, a mentor, I also want to look at that separation between a mentor and a coach, because a mentor is someone who's been there, done that. And they can say, hey, this is what I did. If you do this, you can get to where I am. A coach, which is what I've been for years, is more about the Socratic method, where you draw out from the client. They have the answers, and you're asking them the powerful questions and the right questions at the right time to have them get that awareness of, what's the next action? What's the next thing I can do? So finding that mentor, I think the key would be looking at, what is it that you're wanting to accomplish? What is it you're trying to learn or do? And then look in your circles and circles of your friends, and look beyond that, or even go into conferences and saying, okay, who's someone who is doing what I want to do? And just have the courage to go up and talk to them. So often people are afraid. They're like, why would they want to help me? But just like John in the book, mentors changed his life. So he's just paying it forward, giving back. And that's the way I feel. I still coach people pro bono, because I can see that they can be more of who they want to be, and I can help them, and I just want to give back, So I think that's it. It's just identifying what it is that you want to be mentored on, and kind of look to someone who is like, okay, they've got it figured out, whether it's, I have friends who are incredible in their relationships. So I love to talk. One friend in particular, I talked to him. I'm like, tell me more about, how's your relationship so strong? What have you done? And getting great advice. And then I have, different mentors in real estate who have mentored me in that. So I don't think it's like one mentor. John, in the book, John is kind of like that. he's like, he's got it all together, he's from investing to business to relationship to kids and all that stuff. He's got it all together, but usually it's hard to find someone who's got it all together like that.
Oh, awesome. Guys, we're going to host a little after party. Rich is going to hang out with us if you're joining here live. We're going to do a little Q&A session. But to wrap it up here for everybody on the podcast, Rich, thank you so much for joining me today. You and your wife, Kathy, have been such an inspiration to my journey.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm sure many other people here too. So if someone wants to get started or read the book, like how can they find you and get a copy of your new book?
Yeah, it's on sale right now at Amazon, the ebook. The hardcover, because of supply chain issues and printing, just like in real estate, right? And construction, they're way backed up. So the hardcover won't be printed until August, but you can pre-order it now. But so if you go on Amazon and just look up The Wise Investor, or if you want more information about the book, just go to thewiseinvestorbook.com. Thewiseinvestorbook.com is the easiest way.
Excellent, excellent.